Welcome back. As we promised, we are going to go to Aswan and to know together about the latest discoveries. Our joint French-Egyptian team found the carvings underwater south of Aswan in an area that was flooded when the Aswan High Dam was built in the 1960s of last century. To shed more light on the discovery and on the wonderful city of Aswan in general, we are very much delighted to have with us by phone Mr. Sameh Abbas, our Egyptologist and researcher. Thank you very much for being with us, sir.
Good morning, Nermeen. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Nice to be with you again.
I think under every stone in Egypt and particularly in South Egypt, we're going to find one of the traces of our old Egyptians. And as I'm always saying, our old Egyptian civilization is going to continue to amaze the whole world, and it's our gift to humanity at large. Tell me about the latest discovery, sir.
So first of all, this discovery is extremely important and extremely unique because, so as you mentioned earlier, that if we turned every stone in Egypt, there is a very big chance to find a history behind. But the new thing is to find that under the water as well, so, and especially under the Nile water. So the underwater discovery, it was not common in Egypt until 1992, when a French archaeologist, his name is Frank, in Alexandria, he discovered the important part of ancient Alexandria in the ancient lighthouse under the eastern harbor of Alexandria. And that sounds very well all over the world in that time, that was a breakthrough in archaeology, in the history of archaeology in Egypt in that time. But nowadays we are not talking about actually under the seawater, it became norm in the last 20 years. We are talking about under the Nile water, which has big chances, by the way, to find antiques under the Nile water. That's what I will explain soon. So this is the one of this discovery is the first of its kind to find and record and study antiques under the water. Now, so to make our audience understand exactly what we are talking about and why that is important, we need to share some geographical notes about the region and where it was found, and the historical notes about who made it, or the kings who left these inscriptions and stories behind, and why this monument is under the water now. So because it doesn't make sense, that it to be made by the pharaohs under the water, but there was changes, as you mentioned earlier, in Egypt happens when dams has been built and things has been submerged. So we are, first of all, we are not talking about, like, to be more specified, we are talking about the southern part of Aswan. Aswan has two big dams. So the famous one, which is, the High Dam, which is finished in 1970. But before that, at the end of the 19th century, there was another dam has been built in Aswan, which is called Aswan Dam or Aswan Reservoir. And it is very common that people confuse between the two dams.
Yeah.
So what happens when Aswan Old Dam or Aswan Reservoir has been built, and that is to the north of Aswan High Dam, so that caused a rise of the water to the south of this dam. And some of the monuments in this area, which is known also as the Nubian monument, has been submerged underwater, including an entire temple called Philae Temple. It used to be vested in boats until 1970, and then it was rescued after that. So this part, of course, in the ancient times before building the dams, that was the ancient Egyptian routes to Africa. And that was the Egyptian links to Africa. And you cannot imagine how much the ancient Egyptians back in that time, the focus on this route. And that was, I think that in most of the Egyptian period, that was like 70–80% of the trade of Egypt back in that time was with Africa back in that time. So Africa, for the ancient Egyptians, that was where the water comes from. It was at extremely strategic locations for water, and for many other goods comes from Africa.
It was, and it will continue to be our strategic depth. But let me go to the carvings and to know were they discovered intact, meaning that they were discovered, it's an underwater discovery, but the pieces themselves, the carving themselves were intact, and nothing happened to damage the monuments we are talking about because they are underwater for years now?
Yes, that's a very good question. So for those who visited Aswan and took like a float or motorboat ride in this area, so we understand that it is full of islands of granite, igneous rocks, like volcanic solid igneous rocks. And the ancient Egyptian travelers in this area through Nubia and Africa, they used to leave carvings and graffitis behind, and that was ordered by the kings in order to record their achievements. So the graffitis we are talking about, or the carvings we are talking about, dates back to different periods, more specific to the 18 and 26th dynasty. So we are talking about the 18th dynasty, nearly 1500 BC, 3,500 years ago. 26th dynasty, roughly speaking, 600 BC, which is like 2,600 years ago. So
yeah.
The king, the names which has been found of Teshmetek II of the 26th dynasty, and other kings from the 18th dynasty, such as Thutmose IV and Amenhotep III. So why he left these carvings there? Just to record, to leave a record, historical record, that they led campaigns, or they were active in the routes between Egypt and Nubian Africa in that time. So the solid rocks and the granite that helps in preserving these carvings for not being deteriorated. If it was sandstone or limestone, it will not survive that long. But because of the granite and the very soil, that was.
So let's make it more simple for our viewers. To what extent we are going to have more information about this period, and how we are going to have a rich details, if I may call it this way, on a certain period of our history.
So that's another important question, but I have to attract our attention. So our guest attention to something which is very important. If the Nubians, or many of the Nubian monuments in this region, like Abu Simbel Temple, like Subua, like many other temples actually between Abu Simbel and Aswan, if they have not been rescued, has been cut and transported and re-erected in a higher location, that will be part of the underwater monuments in Aswan.
Yes.
So what we are looking, because after these dams being built and after the high dam being built, so the water rise, and many of the monuments already that was facing the destiny of being submerged under the water, unless a cooperation project, which is help in saving these monuments. So what we are talking about is the leftover, those which is we couldn't save them, considering the time constraints of how fast the high dam was built back in that time. So, but in the same context, I would like to attract the attention of another thing, which is, I think that I already made an interview actually in your studio almost 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I talked about the underwater discoveries in the Nile, and 3 years ago, I talked about that is a new perspective which is not being touched by Egyptian archaeologists to look under the water, and I even located some areas which could be high potentials of finding lots of things under the water, and I will including also the routes between East and West Luxor, and which is, I hope, that will attract the attention of many archaeologists to explore this connection in the water, and I'm pretty sure that you will find hundreds of very valuable antiques and history there. I will tell you why.
Meaning that this was only a start, and we're expecting to discover more and more.
Yes, and it is for a very simple reason. It is not like complicated actually to came with this conclusion. So the ancient Egyptians, they used the Nile River as the highway. Almost 90% of their transportation has been held in the Nile River at that time. So the ancient Egyptians used to bury their dead in the west. So one of the most famous cemeteries like Giza pyramids in the west, Saqqara, Dashur, and in the south, the Valley of the Kings, the nobles' tombs, they are in the west bank of Luxor. And there was a big population living in the east bank already. So after the death, there is a funerals which is held. And the funerals, and according to the ancient Egyptian custom, they used to take their gold and their wealth, as we know, with them to their tombs, which means that they will take boats and ferries across the river back and forth to transport the mummy, the coffin, the treasures, and everything. And definitely accidents happen. We are talking about they were doing that for more than 3,000 years. Accidents happen, and some of these boats sunk in the river, and now it's silted over in the bottom of the Nile. So what we need to have a boat equipped with a sonar system, high technology, to scan the Nile River in the areas which it had a big population of Egypt back in that time, and the best place to start with is Luxor. Scanning the river, and buried under the mud, under the silt, on the bottom of the river, there is a very high expectation to find coffins, even golden mummies, even to find very valuable antiques left by the ancient Egyptians in these boats which is sunk.
Meaning a whole world.
Pardon?
A whole world, meaning we can find a whole world. Discoveries can continue with more and more, with endless discoveries, because there is a whole world which we did not until the moment know anything yet, and what we are talking about is just a start or a first step in a long journey.
Yes, exactly. And I wish, so I wish this discovery or this new approach is to be 100% Egyptian. So far, the underwater discovery in Aswan is like a cooperation, French and Egyptian. The same one in Alexandria in 1992, that was also French archaeologists and Egyptians and archaeologists. It seems that there is something which has attracted the French for the underwater monuments in Egypt, but I hope that the new discovery will be 100% Egyptian, and I think that we have all of the knowledge and technology to do it. There is something unique about the underwater monuments, that it was protected by nature for a very long time. All of these tombs and discoveries in the West Bank and the pyramids and the Valley of the Kings here and there, they have been exposed to grave robbers and also to treasure hunters during the colonial periods of modern Egypt. And there is many valuable things has been already disappeared, has been melted over as gold, or has been taken to museums all over the world, or private collections, and we cannot touch them until now. But those which is sunk in accidents in the Nile, they have been protected by nature, filtered over, which means that we can find antiques which is impossible to find under the current circumstances in a dry land.
Well, Mr. Sameh Abbas, our Egyptologist and researcher, thank you very much for your input, sir, and have a very good day. I cannot find a better end. The Nile River is going to remain the artery of life for Egyptians for thousands of years. And it seems that our old ancestors were not satisfied with only living beside the Nile River, but we lived beneath the Nile River. And the latest discoveries are saying that, as Mr. Sameh said, that it's only a first step in a long journey. And we are going to discover to what extent we respected the Nile River, and we considered it the source of our life, the artery of our life, and it's going to remain our Nile. Well, by this we come to the end of our episode. Stay tuned on Nile TV International, always with more updates. Tomorrow is another day and another episode of The Breakfast Show. Until then, many thanks for watching. This was Nermina Abdurrahman.